exactly where I'm going.
All right, we are starting to go live, I think. Just so
Okay.
you all know.
Yeah, it says live on this end.
That's weird. It kicks you right over to the YouTube channel once it's starting to go live, and then now all I hear is offs 30 seconds ago. Be sent back into time. All right, let's see. Now I give this back to you, Rorden, or oh no, not remove. Nope, do not remove. Cancel.
No, not to
board.
me. Do it.
Village.
Send it back to the village.
All right. Make host. Done.
Okay. Looks good. There's Fire Chief Taylor. That says, not used to saying that yet.
I'm not used to hearing it yet.
Yeah. The only one we're missing is Mr. Carver.
Matt, you look better this way than at 3 o'clock in the morning.
I would say the same to you, Deb, but it was 3 o'clock in the morning.
There he is.
Okay, there's Mr. Carver. Okay. Just looking at a couple things on these controls. All right, so I'm going to start the recording on Zoom Cloud. Okay, so 7:01 p.m., June 8th, 2020. I will call to order this virtual meeting of the Village of Trumansburg Board of Trustees. All trustees are present. First item on the agenda is changes to the agenda. I do have a couple of changes. First is item number 6A2. Richard Kinner will not be joining us. That was actually a error, some kind of a weird error. I don't know if it was my error or someone else's error. I got an email from Mr. Kinner, which actually was from back in April. So I don't know if it was resent or something crazy happened on my end. But in any event, he won't be joining us to talk about fire maps. That was actually what he came to our board meeting back in the late winter to talk about. The other item on the agenda change is we've received a number of correspondences over the weekend, requests from both residents and non-residents regarding a request to have Black Lives Matter flags and or signs placed on village property. So we will address that actually under new business, because as a piece of that conversation is a document I've added to the Dropbox with respect to the town of Ulysses policy on how to field such requests. And we'll get there when we get there. Any other changes, additions, or deletions to the agenda?
I'm going to give a street light update in my portion.
Okay.
Sorry for not adding that sooner. I was waiting on correspondence back from Nightbot, and I got it an hour ago.
Okay.
I have one message to pass along,
Okay.
if I may.
You want to do that now, or do you want to do it during your representatives? Your item number 5, Mark.
Well, it may affect the agenda.
Okay.
So just we had a message from Ann Corman saying that she's feeling under the weather, and she wanted to pass along the message to the board that she will email a county update when she's feeling better.
Great. Okay, thank you for that. Any other changes to the agenda? If not, then item number 3 on the agenda is approval of our minutes from May the 11th, our May the 11th, 2020 meeting. The minutes are in the Dropbox and are part of the agenda packet. if anyone would like to make a motion to approve those. And apparently I have the sun behind me. Hang on one second.
I move that we approve the May minutes as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any comments?
My only comment is that, so usually when we move into executive session, do we stipulate in the minutes, for an executive or legal matter? I think we usually do. And if we don't, we probably should.
Yes, we usually include the reason for the move to executive session.
So I believe this was personnel in this one. So I would just add, the amendment for the third to last motion to go into executive session, that it was for personnel matter.
Okay, so we have that change if there are no objections, and I apologize, I'm monkeying with the camera because of where the sun is setting.
It's a much more exciting ride that way.
Let's try that. Hopefully the iPad doesn't crash to the floor. Any other changes or comments on the minutes? Then hearing none, all in favor of adopting the minutes as amended, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that brings us to item number 4 on the agenda, which is our first public comment period, privilege of the floor. And I see, I'm not sure who the phone number is. We have one individual that's dialed in by phone, and I see Kate Darfler has the distinguished honor of being the first member of the public to ever call in or join one of our Zoom meetings. So
Hi, everyone.
thank you, Kate.
I don't have any specific public comment beyond what I've already submitted to you guys in writing and my short addendum note, but I challenge you to go outside your comfort zones when you're talking about the flags and BLM and outside of what we normally would do. I think we deserve more. So, but thank you. And I will probably try to hop back on closer to new business. I'll listen for a little while and then maybe I'll hop back on a little later. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Kate.
Thanks, Kate. I'm not sure who 379-1702 is, but if they are a member of the public and would like to say something, now is the time.
They have to unmute themselves.
I believe it's *9. Ben, you may know better than I. I think it's *9 to mute and unmute.
You can also click
B.
on the phone itself and it'll unmute it for them.
Well, they're muted on Zoom. I don't know if you want to, you can unmute them too, I think via the village account, if we wanted to try that. I can also look up what the Zoom is.
Do they want to be unmuted is the question, I suppose.
Right, that's true. Let me,
Let's give it a shot.
it is *6. Yes, hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi. Thank you. This is Molly Wadzik Kraus.
Hi, Molly.
Hi. How's it going?
Good.
Yeah, I just wanted to relay some. Hi, Ben. Hi, Keith. I wanted to relay some questions and concerns that had just been brought to me, I guess, speaking collectively from people who were at the demonstration on Saturday, if that's okay and appropriate.
Sure.
Okay, I guess this would probably be directed to Keith primarily, since he oversees the police department. People were wondering why nothing was done at the time of the incident, given multiple officers from multiple law enforcement agencies that were on the scene regarding the car that came into the crowd that pulled out the driveway. And just what is being done, and will the department be issuing a statement to the community as is commonly done for other incidences. So I was just hoping for an update with that, and people had questions in general about how it was handled. And that's all.
Keith, did you get that?
I did. It was going to be part of my police update. I didn't know if with public comment, I don't know. Do we
Entirely up to you. You can address
do we
it.
talk about it
during
right
your-
away or do we want to wait? I'll do either.
Entirely up to you. We can, since you do have an update planned on it, Molly, certainly if you can stick around for a few minutes. Keith is near the top of the agenda when we get to that point.
Sure thing. Thank you very much for your time.
Sure.
Thank you, Molly.
Let's see, any other public comment? And Ben, did you say it's *6?
Yeah, *6.
So Molly, I'm gonna mute you on this end, but if you do need to unmute yourself later on, it's *6 on your phone.
Noted. Thank you.
We'll let you do that. Okay. All right. So if there's no additional public comment, then we will move along to item number 5 on the agenda, which is reports from representatives, of which I believe, Mark, you are solo tonight.
I do not have anything to report other than that which I already reported about Ann Corman. If anybody has any questions, I could address them.
Okay. Any questions for Mark for the town? If not, then we'll move along to item number 6 on the agenda, which is board member reports, starting with fire, CPZR, and farmers.
Sure. So actually, before my report, I just wanted to take a moment to recognize the what our country's going through right now. And so forgive me, I just want to read a quick statement before I jump in. As we all know, George Floyd was murdered on May 25th. His murder, as many before his, stems from racist laws and policies we created in this country at the federal level on down that blocked Black Americans from buying the same houses and working the same jobs as white Americans for most of the 1900s. While these policies are relegated to the waste bin of history, we as a country have yet to dismantle the systemic inequality we built. Thankfully, I look at this community and I see a reason for hope. The protest this weekend was a symbol, an important symbol, but while we all know actions speak louder than words. I'm proud that over the past 3 years, we've had vocal community members step up in support of affordable housing that helps in small part address the racist housing policies of the past. And I'm proud that we have a police chief who is dedicated to community policing and is moving our department in that direction. Of course, that doesn't mean our work here is done. There is still work to do, and I'm personally committed to that work. I know that I'm one person with my own blinders and my own blind spots, so I'm asking for help from the community to bring up issues, point out where we can improve, and have these much needed conversations as we continue to improve this village we all love so much. And with that, I will go into my update. So starting with CPZR, we have our community survey out and available. That's been posted around on Facebook. There will be postcards coming shortly in everyone's mailbox in the village. And I've been in contact with all the local newspapers, and those articles should start coming through next week and the week after. So please tell folks, whoever sees this and folks on the call, let people know to take that survey. That's going to be super helpful for us to get an input from the community, see where people's heads are at with a wide range of questions about our services and our goals for the community, and questions around land use and zoning and all that sort of stuff. So important input into the whole system. Once in parallel, we're wrapping up chapter 3 of the comprehensive plan this month, and we will be getting chapter 4 to review as well. And we're also working on some zoning, kind of a letter of understanding of where we think we need to put some focus on the zoning. So kind of collecting all the bullet points that we need to look at. So that's where the CPZR stands. And our next meeting will be, I a week from this Thursday, so the 18th. The farmers market continues to slowly reopen as our region in New York State slowly reopens itself. We now have, there are now prepared food vendors at the market, so feel free to stop in and get some takeout. I know I've enjoyed the mac and cheese and fried chicken yet again, which is fantastic, and ice cream. It was a very wonderful last Wednesday. I'm looking forward to the next one. The market is investigating tables now that outdoor seating and food is available, and we'll be looking into that as they go forward. And we're in general, they're monitoring the protocols and making sure everyone's staying safe and respecting the current protocols at the market. That seems to be going well. I made a note about CCA. That's a community. Now I've forgotten the acronym. Anyhow, community choice aggregation, which is an odd name. Yeah, thank you. Which is an odd name. But the gist of that is that in New York State, we all have a default power provider. That's NYSEG, as we're all, at least in this area, as we're all probably aware. The state chooses who the default is, right? Someone has to be a default. Most people are familiar with the idea that you can purchase your own power from whoever you'd like instead of that. The state has also delegated the power to local municipalities to pick a different default should we choose. That opens up some interesting opportunities around possibly group buying with other municipalities for a lower rate, looking to use that to move more of the community over to green or local power sources. There's kind of a bunch of different ways that a municipality could go about making use of that opportunity that we have. TCOG has looked at this in the past, and I think felt that at the time there wasn't quite enough pieces put together just yet for it to really make sense, but they've kind of reopened the conversation. So I went to a webinar a couple of weeks ago about, what they're thinking, where their heads are at around that. And that conversation's continuing with the TCOG Energy Subcommittee. So I'm keeping an eye on this to see if we would benefit from plugging in. I think there's probably a lot of good possibilities. I know I've talked with Rorden, and you mentioned in your budget letter, solar is a priority for the village at a municipal level, but this could be an opportunity to include some residential as well. We could have those kind of conversations. So I'm kind of just keeping an eye on where the conversation goes. Just want to let everyone know. And if something kind of comes of it, I'll let you all know, and we can make a decision if that makes sense to join in on them. And then finally, fire. So a couple updates there. One is, if y'all remember, I think it was February, we had a fire meeting with the towns. At that point, I had brought up the idea of reimagining our cost sharing agreements with the towns. I've continued to keep kind of mulling on that idea, and we've got a small working group, one representative from each town, to get together and continue working through that, what that would look like, how that could be rolled out. So that's an ongoing conversation. We finally got that group, the membership of that group squared away, and I'm going to start those conversations shortly to have some some conversations with that smaller group to see if we can work through some of those details. And then the last part is, and this is where Chief Taylor's here, we have a quote in the Dropbox for replacement of rope. The quote you'll notice is for a little over $3,000. Matt has asked it to be up to $3,200 to include shipping and handling, which is not on the quote as of now. And that would come from the fire equipment line, of which there's $5,000 in there. So we've got room for it, but we would need to approve it as a board, not a permissive referendum, just approve it for the value. And my understanding is this is to replace ropes that are now 12 years old, and the NFPA recommendation requirement is to replace after 10 years. So if there's anything else, Matt, you wanted to add to that, I think I hopefully did you justice.
I think you hit all the points, Ben.
Fantastic. So does anyone have any?
If you'd like to
Yeah.
move that, Ben, that we spend up to that dollar amount, just name the two lines we'll be taking it from.
Yeah,
And again,
sure.
it's not
So
subject, it's not, these are not reserve lines, they're budget spending lines.
Yeah,
so
it's
they're over and
budget
above.
spending line. So it was, we had put $5,000 last year into, I think it's 3410.2 or something right off the top of my head.
I can
For
pull
rope
that up, too.
replacement. So it'll come out of that line there, Ben.
yeah, so you would ask for 3410.2, the fire equipment line, which we should have $5,000 in, and we're asking for 32 out of that. So I move that we approve up to $32,000 from the fire equipment line to replace rope.
And that was 3,200.
Yeah, sorry. Yep, 3,200.
Yeah.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion?
I just want to point out that I've really enjoyed the pictures of the training on those ropes. Looks.
That's the old rope, Ben. So
Oh, well, I'm going to
we
enjoy
were-
the new pictures better. I
yeah,
should-
yeah. The new stuff, we won't be sweating as much. Some of that rope was pretty rugged looking.
Yeah, it made me sweat a little to see, but it's good.
Any additional discussion on the rope purchase? Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, Matt, you're all set.
Beautiful.
Anything else, Ben?
That'll be it.
Okay, any questions from anyone for Ben? All right, next up is Ben Carver, EMS, Recreation and Street Tree Advisory.
So I have sort of long and short version of the youth report. Essentially, we are grappling with reopening as far as the camp is concerned, and also as far as our normal programming. And the normal procedure at this point would be to ramp up summer employment, which is a program that is run that usually employs around 20 kids and is somewhat difficult this year to negotiate which employers would want people. Are we taking jobs from people who are otherwise out of work? That kind of thing. So there's a lot of I don't know, a lot of gray areas and tricky things to figure out. So I was hoping to get a sense from everyone here, in particular as it relates to the camp. It looks like if we can open, which we have been told at this point that camps will be able to open for the summer. I think it's July 10th, if I'm remembering the date right. But we haven't been given guidelines as far as what is acceptable as far as number of kids, ratio to counselors, how many you can have, if we'll be able to do busing to go to the lake and do swimming and all of those things. And underlying all of this is the general feeling, although again, we don't have specific guidelines, so it's hard to tell, but the general feeling is that we're likely to run into the red at some point. How far, by how much, we don't really know. At this point, everything is kind of up in the air. My feeling, which I expressed to the rest of the youth commission, is that this program has been in the red before, and I would be more inclined, at this point, it's essentially providing what I believe is an essential service for a lot of community members as far as childcare that is really difficult to find lately. So I would like to see as much as we can do, I mean, within reason, but I would like to get a general sense from other board members if you're all right with that approach, doing essentially everything we can, but accepting that we will be at least a little bit over budget.
Is there a short version of where that shortage comes from? I'm assuming lesser folks and that kind of a thing, or?
So we're not sure. I mean, we don't really know is the bottom line. The guidelines haven't come out. So it's possible a camp that usually has 80 kids, we may only be able to have 40, right? We just don't know. It's also likely that the ratio of campers to counselors has always been a health department dictate, but it's likely that that will be more stringent this year, that we'll have to have more counselors. There's also we may have to use more, if we can do busing to go to the school, or to go to the lake rather. It's possible that we will have to use twice as many buses. We may have to find much more indoor space. If we can't go swimming, it's sort of like a snowball rolling down the hill, and every time you look at it, it's gotten bigger, and there's more things that we might have to do. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I'll say from my perspective, I agree with you. I think it is, I mean, childcare throughout all of this has been a rough road and an essential part of people getting back to work and people getting back to their livelihoods. So I do see it as an essential service, essentially, at least in not in the specific terms, but in the, in the reality of the world right now. So I'm open to seeing what that looks like,
And just for reference, the MOU that's in place now will see the village and town splitting any overage at the end of the year when we do that account. So, but yeah, other thoughts. I mean, I know it's kind of a wishy-washy, non-specific statement, and I apologize for that. I wish there were more details to share.
I mean, I think it's like everything else. At this point, we're waiting on guidance and twisting in the wind a little bit. So I think, on principle, it's certainly something that we've committed to support through the through the MOU process. Right. So, right. Without knowing specifically how much we're talking about, it's hard to say we wouldn't go so far as to X until we know what X is.
Well, I think, yeah, I don't imagine that it will be worse than past years have been. I mean, last year was close to 12,000 over. So I don't imagine we're looking at that realm, but it's meaningful money. It's a real thing. I also think it's a meaningful service. The other thing I wanted to share from
actually, Ben, if I could ask one more question, do you imagine we will have another point at which we can ask the same question with likely more details?
I hope so. I was hoping, so we were all expecting to have more details by tonight. We found out last week that that the camp would, at least in theory, be able to run. And they said they were going to, imminently release guidance as far as that goes. So Will Glennon, the new director of the camp, has been just constantly searching for, he's found what Jersey is doing when they reopen camps, because they've already released guidance. So he's looking around. He has some sort of vague ideas, but at this point, it's still unclear. It's possible that the guidelines will be so restrictive that it's just not practical, and we just don't know.
Yeah,
it's really disappointing, quite frankly. I mean, I think at this point most camps have already closed, so maybe the pressure isn't on as much. But ours is one of the few, at least in the area, that's holding on to hope that we'll be able to open, which to me makes it even more important that we do so. But yeah, I will certainly let people know as that develops, because it's kind of a critical thing. I mean, also, I know a lot of us are parents, so it's critical on a personal level too. The other thing I wanted to share, though, is that our program manager works with Cornell Cooperative Extension to put on a lot of programs, as does program managers around the county. And one of the things that they're doing in order to try and be responsive to the needs of youth in the county at that level is to open up programming that we do. It's obviously based in the town, but we fund. So opening up that funding those programs rather, to youth throughout the county. So anyone can sign up, they can share. Likewise, Trumansburg Ulysses Youth can enroll in programs outside of Trumansburg Ulysses, which I think is really great. It allows us to do a lot of things. It also allows us to continue to provide programming for students who used to live in T-Berg and then left, and that kind of thing. But I thought that was a good, a nice thing to share. There was a lot in that youth commission meeting about the various ways that people are being really agile and clever in their approach to dealing with this and still maintaining some level of service for students and youth in our community that are not, may not have the same level of access, or may not have the highest level of access. So in any case, just wanted to share that. The tree committee, we just sent out the letter to homeowners, the owners of the dangerous trees. So thank you, Tammy, for putting that in the mail. We will see how it goes. I have also been toying with the idea of reaching out to the other tree companies in the area and seeing if they would be willing to volunteer service for any of these trees, and just wanted to get feedback. I mean, I know obviously I would, but there's about 1 million tree companies in our area. And if we each did a small piece, these are sort of mandatory trees that people will not have had time to plan for financially. But I wanted to get a sense if people are all right with me reaching out and seeing if that can happen. I don't know. Generally, I've never done this. I don't know if the village has asked for volunteers in this way before. So if people are on board or indifferent, I'll take that on.
I'm not aware of something like this being done before. So I think, unless there's any objections from anyone else on the board, I think it's great if you want to take it on and kind of see what you find.
Yeah, I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
I know. Well, we'll see. There's enough companies that I imagine at least 1 or 2 will be on board.
Right.
And then for EMS, Chris has started to, he's figured out the software enough to produce our monthly reports and our call numbers. So the village had 19 calls last month, but I wanted to get a sense from everyone. I keep saying this, I apologize over and over, but in any case, wanted to get an idea what kind of data we would all like to see from the EMS department. So what feels like it would be useful. We obviously have district-wide. I could provide the whole breakdown as far as each municipality or each contract. Wasn't sure what people would want to see.
Can say briefly, the stuff that I've been looking at on the fire side has been clearly, obviously, calls for service in the different municipalities, but also if there's a way to pull call times, like the duration from kind of getting the call to driving out to wherever it is to coming back, and potentially dropping off someone at a hospital, right? That might even be more interesting at an EMS. In an EMS place.
So that data we can get you. I think that's probably more finer detail than I'd want to put in a monthly report. But if you want to see that, we can pull it all up down to just the itty bittiest.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for just yeah, I think that's interesting for us internally as far as like a monthly report. For the public, maybe just calls per municipality. I don't.
Okay.
I don't
that's
really
what
know.
We've done historically. I just thought I'd check since we have sort of the capability to add more or different things.
I know Keith is.
Oh, go ahead, Ben.
Well, I was going to say I know Keith has broken down police by kind of broad category.
Well,
may be interesting, but I'm not sure. I don't know how it applies to EMS.
There's ALS and BLS would be the obvious. Advanced life support.
Yeah, that could be interesting.
There's also assists. Or things where we don't bill. So that would be 3 obvious categories.
Yeah, I would like to continue to see total call volume by municipality that we contract with, mutual aid breakout. I'd actually like to see where the mutual aid calls are going, who we're picking up, because that'll give us a sense of who we're going to potentially need to pick up more as time goes. And then, the ALS, BLS breakdown I'd like to see. Chris was saying that he was having a hard time kind of sorting that out over a longer period of time. So I think if we do that monthly, it might be easier for him to go through 20 calls and then just track that separately in a spreadsheet somewhere. So that way we can collate that over time to get annual numbers.
Yeah, that's an idea. I like that.
One of the items I'd be interested in is the hospitals you're dropping at
Hmm.
out, whether it's not necessarily, just the ones that are out of our normal district.
Yeah.
That distance is going to be a determining factor on time and access for everyone.
Yeah, that'll
Yeah,
be
that's a-
particularly interesting if we do transports at some point
Mhm.
in the future.
That's a good one. And Ben, if Chris is going to be doing this monthly, so we can kind of get a little bit more granular and then keep track of it separately, I would like to know the number of calls that result in any type of patient care, but does not result in a transport.
Yeah.
So that would obviously not be getting billed at the moment, but I'd like to know, what that entails.
Yeah, but do require care,
Correct.
right? So we'd be looking for potential billing that we're just not doing now, rather than like just an assist or something like that.
Correct. So the bee sting that results in, some type of antihistamine pill or something, but does not require a trip to the hospital or something along those lines. Where the patient, essentially the patient refuses the transport but receives some type of care. I'd like to see what that looks like.
Okay, great. I will touch base with Chris about that. The other thing that I had, I apologize, I didn't share this earlier, is Chris would like to retrofit 2 of our stretchers. At this point, we cannot handle overweight patients, essentially. So he had an incident.
Ben, the term's bariatric.
Very good.
So it's
Bariatric.
bariatric patients, yes.
Right. All right. Yeah, that actually is an important distinction. Thanks, man.
Yep.
How do I know if I
Anyways.
qualify? Just,
By the size of your hair.
I'm in trouble. All right, sorry, Ben.
No, that's fine. So this is, I think, Chris believes it's quite important. I don't know how many incidents we've had where this has been relevant. One happened recently, obviously, that brought it up. But Chris is looking ahead, I think, a little bit to revenue streams where we might be transporting patients more regularly between hospitals, where this might come up more frequently. So I think it would certainly help us now, but it's really forward thinking. So in any case, the cost is $5,600 or $5,700, so it's substantial. But Chris believes it's important. I tend to agree with him, at least as far as moving forward goes. But if we are all right with that, then I will make a motion. Actually, I was thinking, geez, has anyone heard from Vicky?
I'll bring everything as well. We'll give you an update in executive session.
Very good. In any case, I was hoping to ask her what the equipment line reserve was, but in any case, I will move that we approve up to $5,700 to retrofit our 2 stretchers coming out of the EMS equipment reserve.
We have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
I'll
I'll
second.
second.
Any additional discussion on retrofitting 2 stretchers for bariatric lift capacity and capability?
The one thing I'll just add is that my first question was whether we could do 1 rather than 2. And Chris was fairly convinced that 2 was necessary to make it work in case an ambulance is out and that kind of thing.
A lot of times you don't know that information until you get on scene.
Right.
So it's not like you know that it's a bariatric patient at dispatch. So you would take the appropriate ambulance. You get there, then you don't want to go back, get another ambulance and come back.
Swap them out.
I would agree with Chris. It's best just to do both.
Thanks, Matt. Any additional discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Anything else for you, Ben?
Nope.
Any
Lauren,
questions? For me?
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, do you want to move me up? I know Molly's waiting, and I know what it's like to be a parent at this time of night. So
Okay.
usually, Debbie goes ahead of me, but I didn't know if you wanted to say
Sure,
something.
we can do.
Be my guest, Keith.
We can do that. We will move then.
That's okay with Debbie.
Yeah.
We'll switch spots with Deb and Keith, and have Keith go next with an update from police and Trumansburg Chamber.
First, I'll just get the monthly stats update out of the way. In May, we had 292 calls for service during the month, responded to 2 calls for service outside of the village. We investigated and assisted the New York State Police and Tompkins County Sheriff Department for service in the town of Ulysses. It was 1 motor vehicle crash and 1 suspicious person. We had a high-speed chase through the village. Don't get that very often. So those of you that have lived in or worked in, missed the big city. Unfortunately, we didn't have a chopper to follow along like they do in LA, but the following categories outline the calls of service: 1 domestic dispute, 2 harassment, 14 thefts and larcenies, 183 property checks, basically round out most of the month. During the month of May, there was an increase of reported larcenies from unlocked vehicles. And as a result of the department investigating the reported larcenies, a subject was arrested and charged with criminal possession of stolen property. And also the department made an arrest for criminal mischief for damage done to the Trumansburg School District lawns. So moving on to the Saturday's protest. Before I try to answer Molly's question the best I can, just to give a little timeline. So there was a protest on Saturday afternoon. Chief and the organizer, or demonstration, I should say, protest demonstration. Chief and the organizer had exchanged emails during the week leading up to it, so there was a good flow of communication there. Chief was told that, if I understand it right, that it would be people would be lining the sidewalk from the library to the post office. But understandably, there was also preparing for the potential that it would spill into the street, which inevitably it did. And as what Chief has relayed to me is, once that happened, they shut down both sides of Main Street and checkpoints at the roads leading into Main Street. He did try to bring in some extra part-timers in preparation should anything happen out of what was planned. And eventually, I would know, to be perfectly clear, I was not present until about an hour something into the protest. So there was an incident in which a car made its way on to Main Street, which it's believed to be from a driveway on Main Street, and entered Main Street while protesters were marching. Officer Covert responded and essentially escorted the car off of Main Street, off into a side road. I believe it was Elm Street, I'm not sure. And much of this will be, I need to be a little bit vague because it's an ongoing investigation, and there will be a full report of the incident when the investigation has concluded. And just want to make sure I'm not leaving out any details here. I also want to mention that Chief, when speaking with the organizers, made it clear he said to me, his goal was to make sure that our department was invisible for this. He wanted to be in the background, to be used if needed, not to be visible for this demonstration. He wanted the demonstration to be able to, be on its own without law enforcement around it. Of course, once it went into the street, that had to change. As for why the person was not ticketed, again, I don't want to speculate too much because I didn't see it. I talked to Officer Covert for about 15, 20 minutes at the conclusion of the protest, and she gave me a recap, a little bit of a recap. But again, it will all go into the report. What I can say is I asked Chief that exact question. I said, why in that situation would Officer McKenzie not ticket the driver? And from my understanding, it basically comes down to a couple of things. First, I will say that Chief wants to be absolutely clear that he believes Officer McKenzie handled the situation exactly how he would have wanted her to handle it. And so he wanted that to be clear. In addition to that, it was a matter of a couple things. It was a matter of what the officer witnessed, which I think is different from some of the accounts of when the car first got on to the road. And Chief also wanted to convey that it often comes down to how many people we have on the ground. And he said if we had several officers at the point where Officer Covert got to the vehicle, if there was several other officers where some could have dealt with the driver and taken the driver aside, and somebody could get back to Officer McKenzie's checkpoint, which was put there to make sure no other cars got on the road, then it could have been a situation where the driver was more interrogated and potentially ticketed. But as it played out, again, I don't want to speak too much for the department, but he was just very happy that Officer McKenzie was able to get the car off of Main Street and get back to her post without anybody getting hurt. And now the investigation, they have substantial information, and they are now in an active investigation with the driver of the vehicle. So I don't know if that's I hope that's a helpful answer. And I don't know if Molly's still here, but it doesn't look like it. But if anyone else has any questions on that, or Rorden, you may have had additional talk with the chief, or you got more information, but that's about the extent of it as far as I can relay right now.
Yeah, I mean, in general, from this point going forward, it is an open police investigation on which we cannot comment. I do know that there, and this is, in a way, it's neither here nor there, because it is what it is. But there is a nuance in that the road closure was done as an emergency measure when people spilled into the road. There was not a permitted closure approved by New York State because it is a state road. So there may be, certainly in that moment, I support Chief's analysis of his officer's actions as being appropriate to de-escalate and diffuse the situation as quickly as possible. And we can all look back with hindsight and say what we may have, could have, or should have done differently. From a legal perspective, I think there's a question as to whether tickets could be issued to a driver who is driving legally on a road which had not been closed by the prevailing authority. But that'll be something that'll come out in the investigation once it's concluded.
Yeah, and so I'll just add that Chief has been alerted that there is another scheduled protest for this Saturday at the same time, 12 to 2. Again, he has been in contact with the organizer. And essentially he's going to put the same game plan together. I would tell he did want to convey to me that it was handed down to him this week that the state police will be scaling back their support of protests. And so he just wanted to be, let everyone know that, very supportive of the demonstrations and the protest. But Trumansburg is not, the department is not built to manage a protest of hundreds of people. And, they will continue to do their best. They'll try to call extra people in as they did this past weekend. But it can be a tough situation for a small department to try to block all those roads and make sure everyone stays safe. And, that's their number one goal. It's not to confront, it's to, make sure that traffic's not going to do harm to anyone. And they'll enact that game plan, and they'll do everything they can. I have been reading up on some good articles that, kind of give advice for people that are protesting and demonstrating and are going to be occupying roadways. I think it's basically good advice on, how to be aware of your surroundings. And so I would encourage anyone who's going to participate and think they're going to do that, to just do that and just take an extra bit of care to make sure you protect you and your family as best you can. And I think that's it on the protests. If anybody else does anyone on the board or anybody else have any questions about?
So I got a question for you, Keith. I was alerted by a passerby about that demonstration.
Mhm.
If I could just be kept in the loop, if we get a call inside the village on Main Street, that we take the appropriate precautions, of whether we talk to the police department on our radios and they can help us navigate the people without any trouble, or whatever it may be. So sometimes the main streets are thoroughfare with volunteers coming and trying to get through. I'll shoot out an email about next Saturday, this coming Saturday, that the streets could be tied up from noon to 2 or a little before and a little after. So take, measures to avoid that area if you're responding to the firehouse. Well, that's all I have.
Okay. Yeah. So it'll be, again, Saturday, 12 to 2 is what
Sure.
Chief told.
All right.
All right. Just some other things on that. There's been is part of discussions on, how police departments can be more proactive in ensuring that, there's a quality culture about the department. I'm not going to rehash too much of that. Chief put out a statement. I think it's in some newspapers and it's on the Trumansburg Police Department Facebook page. So it kind of gives you a feeling on where he stands on all this. But we have discussed the 8 can't wait. He's looked at those. He does feel a lot of them are covered by New York state law, and it's just kind of a matter of enforcement and department culture to make sure that those things are upheld. But we are taking an extra look at them, and we'll have more of a public statement on that particular initiative. And he also wanted to convey that he did apply for application into the FBI use of force database. So that's another kind of action that everyone has, not everyone has, many folks have asked departments to look into and take. So he has filed that application as well. Regarding, I think that's it for police. Again, unless there's any additional questions that I can answer. But again, Chief, very accessible. Please email him. He's very open to emails. And when we're able, even popping into the department and having a conversation with him, he's never shied away from any of that. I'm a liaison. I'm not a law enforcement officer, so I do the best I can to convey the department's intentions and in chief's intentions and vision and the culture he's trying to maintain in the department and within the community. But please know, for really specific law-related questions, he's always happy to answer them. Regarding Chamber of Commerce, Stephen Daly was named the new president in a meeting last week. Despite our financial troubles, some of us on the board are going to pitch in and ensure that we can still give the Mary Cronk Scholarship to a graduating senior. So we're still going to do that as a board. We're moving forward with a new bookkeeper who we're going to pay a rate to kind of get us going on a new software and get everything organized, and so we don't have more financial issues. And regarding the fraud investigation, that is reaching its conclusion. Little slowed down because of people not being able to be in the station as much, and so once we can kind of return to normal operations, we hope that will reach its conclusion. And I think that's it for me.
Any questions for Keith? Okay. Flip flop. Now to you, Deb. DPW Water and Sewer.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so it's summer. Well, our team is back on the lawn and taking care of everything outside. As you know, I recently got a report that there was a truck backing up to the mulch piles and just helping themselves. And we're not talking buckets, but we're talking trucks. And I've talked to Dusty about that. We will be posting the land, which I don't see why it isn't a crime anyway, but there are cameras there that we're going to be able to follow through that are there for the sewer plant. So that'll be part, that's one of the things that we're going to be following up on. In the Dropbox, there are several documents pertaining to sewer projects. And I need to, let's see, the first one, I'm trying to get the first one open. It's Corby's Trumansburg Sewer Televising. As you may or may not be aware, we have had televising done already in a couple of spots in within the sewer system, trying to find the points of influence and find out if there are any broken pipes that are directly affecting this. We've determined after a number of fits and starts that the quality of the televising that we've received to date is inadequate. We believe that we need to clean and then televise the actual the actual pipes during normal rates or normal times, and then also when high water rates. So there is a sanitary sewer clean and televise quote from I don't know who this is. Hang on. From Core VIS. This is for a total of $35,520, and this will allow them to clean and then televise those sanitary sewer pipes. And the quality is guaranteed, and they will be jetting the pipes so that we are actually seeing the pipes, seeing the actual sides during the televising. So I will be I'd like to propose that a resolution that will allow us to take $520 out of our sewer repair fund to finish and to start and finish the entire sewer investigation. We need to come to conclusion for the I. That's the bottom line here. So this is for that.
So this is part one. There's been a fair bit of correspondence back and forth, including myself and Deb and MRB, our engineer, regarding moving forward on issues related to I. And one of them is televising a fair bit of sewer line to find out what the flow rate looks like during normal time periods and in high rain events. We had another company, as Deb mentioned, do this previously, but the quality of the video was so poor that there was no way to get any usable information out of it. So this is a firm out of Lyons, which MRB has worked with many times in the past. They recommend them and stand by their work. So it's a big price tag, but we have the funds in reserve. And Deb, do you want to make it up to 36,000 just to be safe?
Actually, if I can make one resolution, I'd like to include the other quote that we're going to go over and just make it 40 even.
Could you speak briefly? What are the two different lines? I saw it's broke down into two different lines there.
I really can't. I know that the normal rates are, I think the PW rates are high water events.
Okay.
That they'll be there when it's raining or in the middle of the night but I'm not certain of that, Ben. I just believe.
No, that's fine. Yeah, that would make sense, right? It's the same, it's 2 times linear feet, but one's at low and one's at high.
That's correct.
Seems to make sense to me.
That is correct. Okay, the other document that was in the Dropbox was a document for a flow meter, and this flow meter is to be installed once, and it will be installed. It will be it's a velocity flow meter, and I believe this is for excuse me. We want to place this outside of Aubles, right? Merton, wasn't
Right. That's one of the locations. This is a continuous flow meter that reads flow continuously for two consecutive weeks. So whereas the sewer line filming looks at what's happening and is a snapshot in time, and they hope to catch the right time to take that snapshot, this is a non-video sewage flow meter. It's the sewer version of a water meter, basically, and it'll measure total flow over a longer period of time. And between this and the televising, the data that comes from it, the engineering firm will be able to get a better sense of, hopefully, where some of the I is originating. We hope. We are, and I will.
Go ahead.
I will acknowledge for the record that this is, we're several years into this, and DEC is watching closely, and it is something of a bit of a game of whack-a-mole, unfortunately. We started with smoke testing. We started with sump pump infiltration, which we're still investigating. So we're now basically trying to figure out where, as we saw last month with a sudden large rain event, the sudden flow at the sewer plant is still extremely, extremely high. And we need to try to figure out where it's coming from.
And we do believe that that Aubles is a contributing factor. We saw that in some of the original I&I, but we have no idea how much, which is the reasoning for the flow meter being placed in that position. So this flow meter installation and excavation and removal price is $2,850. That can be increased if there isn't any high water or events either, for another 2 weeks for $1,130 for this. So between the two items, I'd like to put up for resolution out of the sewer repair reserve.
Repair reserve.
Right, I'd like to propose that we allot $40,000 to cover these two items.
And that'll be subject to permissive referendum, I believe.
I do believe that's correct.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any questions, discussion on these two proposed expenditures?
Nope.
Okay, go ahead, Deb.
No, I'm good, Vern.
Hearing no questions or comments, then all in favor of approving this resolution subject to permissive referendum, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, back to you, Deb.
There was sewer, I don't have anything other than, we did get the letter out about the billing for every 2 weeks. Or every 2 weeks, excuse me, every 2 months as opposed to every 3 months. I did get some communication and I owe a response to one of our residents. And it just occurred to me that I owed that response. So the goal of having this every 2 weeks is to allow people to have a better handle and less of a chunk to have to pay in a more distributed manner over the year. As the rates have gone up, the quarterly payments obviously take a toll. So we felt that being bi-monthly was probably better for a number of our residents who are trying to work within a closer knit budget. Any comments on that, Gordon?
No, other than to say I've also fielded a couple of questions on it and explained the same. And one comment actually that I got from a resident I think is worthwhile, and that is maybe at our next State of the Village. We'll see. I would say you're not going to be there for it, but
I'll be in the audience
for a few months. What I'd like to do is go back to, I think it was 2013 when we first essentially gave the go-ahead for both the water and sewer projects, and we're talking about rates on both doubling. Now that they're both done, I'd like to look and see where we're at. I know we're less than double, but to see exactly what the numbers are and kind of flesh that out, because it's been a few years, so that'll add some perspective to the conversation, I think, when we get there.
I agree. Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Any questions for Deb? Okay, we did police. Vicky is excused. Tammy, anything from the newly reopened clerk's office?
No, I spent much of the month of May stuffing envelopes. Right. And getting all the mailings out. And as you all know, the tax bills went out on June 1st. So the office was super quiet today. We got a lot done, but it's quiet.
Mhm.
Other than that, nothing. Unless somebody's got specific questions. And Ben, your mailing went out today, so you're good. Ben Carver.
Thought you meant me.
Any questions for Tammy? Okay, to my report, just a couple of items. I will very briefly add on to something Keith mentioned. I did issue a statement last week, which I stand by wholeheartedly with respect to what's going on in the country. I feel that the role of mayor, although certainly it's well within the prerogative of mayors to take on an activist role, I believe that the appropriate role for me, at least as mayor, is one of administrative oversight and the defending of rights of those folks who live in, work in, and visit the village. That does include the First Amendment right to demonstrate and peaceably assemble for whatever that purpose might include. So the village will not be following its normal permitting requirements when it comes to assemblies and or special events. We don't require special event permits for those who are organizing political demonstrations or protests, because I tend to fall into the camp that if it's a constitutionally protected right, then generally permitting is something that should be done in a very limited scope, if at all. I will say, however, that after Saturday, I was pleased to see as many people turn out as they did, and that everyone followed the spirit of the word peaceably in the phrase peaceably assemble. However, it should be understood that the village does not control Route 96. And so I would just encourage organizers, and I know that this is to echo what Chief Nelson has said, I would encourage organizers to try and utilize public rights of way like sidewalks as best they can. If it is true, and I don't have any additional knowledge other than what Keith passed along, if it is true that the New York State Police will be in any way changing their approach to demonstrations that spill over into state highways, of which Main Street is one, then the village will not have any recourse or ability to redirect New York State's handling of those matters. So again, from a constitutional perspective, I will certainly defend the ability of those who want to gather peaceably in areas where that is able to be done without disruption of something like a state highway where our jurisdiction essentially ends. As far as what I have listed on the agenda, a couple of items. As I mentioned earlier, the main office did reopen today. We have changed our office hours, which have been posted and made public, but just if anyone's keeping track at home, our main office hours are now 8 to 5, Monday through Thursday. The main office will be closed on Fridays. And certain protocols have been put into place within the office itself. There's a newly installed plexiglass divider at the window where folks can make their payments. Masks or face coverings are required of any member of the public who enters the building. And in the front foyer area, kind of inside that main entrance, we're allowing no more than 2 non-family members at a time. So I mentioned to someone earlier today, if it's a mom or a dad with 8 kids, that's fine. But if it's 3 unrelated parties, then one of them will have to wait out on the porch until there's room for them inside. Tammy mentioned property tax bills have gone out. The village did receive approval from the governor's office to have an extended deadline for final receipt of our bills. That is only an extension of 3 weeks. So we're looking at, and it's 21 calendar days, not business days. So July 21st is now the deadline for property tax bills. Beyond that date, penalties and interest will accrue as they normally do. The one item that I want to mention, which is newer, there is a letter available in the Dropbox. It's 6G3. This was a letter that I received a couple of weeks ago now, the developers of the 46 South Street property, specifically Ithaca Neighborhood Housing, they are seeking to designate 15% of the affordable units for disabled veterans. There are various carve-outs in New York State law that allow for that to be done. It has to be fairly specific. So there are specific, and I don't know all of them off the top of my head, but there are specific categories of disabled veterans that can be assisted under these laws, both physical and mental and other types of disabilities qualify. And although Tompkins County has formed a Veterans Affairs office, they're not properly staffed at the moment, or adequately staffed in terms of numbers to be able to assist with some of the items that may be needed. So the letter for your review is simply asking for the village's support, and it's somewhat undefined. It's not a monetary support, but the village's support in concept for the designation of 15% of these future units for disabled veterans. What it could mean in practice is there needs to be some research done on what category of disabled veteran might, what population numbers of certain classifications of disabled veteran might best be served in our area. So for instance, do we have a population of physically disabled veterans? Do we have a population of traumatic brain injury and PTSD qualifying disabled veterans? What about veterans who are under treatment or have been categorized as disabled by the VA for substance abuse issues? So we need to find out kind of what is most prevalent in our area. Otherwise, these units would be designated for a classification of veteran and never be filled. And there is some caveat within the state law that once you've designated these units for this particular classification and purpose, you can't change the designation. So they really want to make sure that they get their information correct, and are asking the village for support in potentially doing some of that research. I am certainly supportive of it, but I wanted to see what the boards take. It doesn't require any specific action at the moment, so there's no resolution to be considered, but wanted to gauge the temperature of the board for potentially being involved in this fashion for this purpose. Any thoughts from anyone on the board?
Yeah, what's the objective here? I mean, because obviously you could have those same veterans come without specifically designating those units for them. So what's the goal of making this designation specifically?
Theoretically, the goal is so that if there are, for round numbers sake, if there are 40 units and 150 applicants to live there, that the disabled veteran could fall into the lucky 40, but there's no guarantee that they would. So by setting it aside, then they are making sure that there is going to be some capacity to meet that need, assuming, and that's the assumption, assuming that it exists.
Is it a fair assessment to look at this and survey our existing residents? Wouldn't it? I mean, it seems to me that the people that would be renting would be coming from somewhere else, or could very well, the population would probably come from somewhere else because the people that are already here obviously are housed.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assumption, and I think that some of the information that we may be, and I don't know how much the village will need to do on this front, but we may be able to be helpful, is to work with Tompkins County Veteran Affairs Office, as well as the VA offices in Bath and Cortland and Syracuse, to kind of gather some of these demographic informations and get a better sense of what the need is regionally. because I don't know how we would find that out specifically for the village, but I think you're right, Deb. I think it's the assumption that some of these folks would not be current village residents, and so there'll be a need for a broader gathering of information.
It would be much more comfortable if we were making a resolution about not having more disabled veterans.
Indeed. Anyone else have thoughts, comments?
I do believe that we owe our veterans. I do believe that it's a worthwhile endeavor, but like so many things, it's the execution that determines it one way or the other. It's not helpful.
Yeah, I agree 100%, and that's one of the reasons why I'm supportive of being involved. I would just assume, and I think this is, and I don't want to get out into the weeds on this, but I think one of the big advantages, if a development is going to happen of any type, I would much rather work with a local organization who is seeking our input and support, rather than have something, built out by a developer from Colorado who could care less. So I think this is one of those things where I think the execution piece of it is important, and so the village's involvement from this point forward can be a good thing.
I think in general, I'm supportive. I do think it's a strangely narrow category to say not only mentally ill veterans, but these specific subcategories. And it just strikes me as bizarrely narrow. But in general, I'm supportive of something like this. I mean, sure.
And I know you all see the letter, but just for the record, it's actually several categories, which I'll just read quickly. It's homeless veterans, veterans in long-term recovery from alcohol abuse, veterans in long-term recovery from substance abuse, veterans with intellectual or developmental disabilities, veterans who are victims of domestic violence, veterans with AIDS, HIV-related illness, veterans with physical disabilities or traumatic brain injury, veterans with psychiatric disabilities, or veterans who are frail elderly. So it's actually a fairly wide-ranging group of potentially of folks.
I'll also just pipe in to say, I agree in concept. I feel like we're in a similar place as the summer program is. I agree in concept, and we'll see how it plays out.
Okay. Okay, good. I will move on then to, unless there's any other comment or question for me, I will move on then to item number 7 on the agenda, which is old business. So in the Dropbox and in the agenda packet, there are several items related to outdoor seating. Now, this had been on my radar to be discussed and addressed tonight in advance of phase 3 reopening, which, if all went well, would have happened next week. And then our friend, the governor, decided last week, without warning or notice to anyone, including Tompkins County, that outdoor seating would be available or allowed by restaurants in phase 2 for those regions which are in phase 2 like we are. So as you've seen, there are a number of establishments in the village which are using that, and I'm glad to see them out. I'm glad the weather is cooperating. We have some statistics which aren't ready for prime time yet, but I'll be sharing in coming months in terms of a survey of local businesses and kind of the stresses that they were under during the shutdown. So I'm certainly eager to help local businesses as best we can in trying to get back on their feet. And I'm just looking over here to pull up a document. And just by way of background, I think everyone on the board is aware, but by way of background, the village has an open container law, or had an open container law, which was put into place in 1978, which essentially prohibited the consumption of any alcohol beverage in any public right of way. So sidewalks basically is what it came down to, sidewalks and roadways. That stood in effect from 1978 until 2015. And in 2015, the village amended the open container law to allow for limited circumstances where adult beverages could be served outside in public right of way. And one of those exceptions was for dining establishments that maintained outdoor seating for patrons, and that those dining establishments would have to apply for and receive a permit from the village to have that outdoor seating. And as part of that permit application, they would have to provide a sketch plan of the area, pay a fee, and so on. So that obviously precludes non-dining establishments, although the governor's order last week includes not only food but beverage. So right now, under our current law, that would not be permitted. And also, the sketch plan requirement can't be waived outside of the local law process. So what I'm bringing up for discussion is, and you'll see in the Dropbox a couple of drafts. What I'm suggesting is that we should or could consider an amendment, not a complete rewrite, but an amendment to the 2015 open container law, which simply amends the section which discusses who can apply and the requirements for the sketch plan. And amending it to read that an establishment can apply for and receive an outdoor permit from the village, that process would be created by resolution, not subject to the local law itself, and that the outdoor seating area needs to be properly marked and so on, which is in the 2015 law, but that the sketch plan of the outdoor seating area should be submitted with the permit application, but that is subject to waiver. So it's changing the local law just a little bit to give the board more flexibility to allow for certain flexibility and leeway in the application process. It also allows for the service of alcoholic beverages outside. So this would apply to bars and microbreweries, wineries. If we ever have a winery that wants to have a distribution site or a tasting site within the village, that these terms as far as the hours that they can serve and whatnot could be set by the board by resolution. And then there's as well a draft seating, draft of the resolution itself for the rest of 2020. And my suggestion for the rest of 2020 is, first of all, if the board is of a mind to do this, then we would need to schedule a public hearing for the amendment to the 2015 law. I would recommend doing that as soon as we can, if the sentiment is to do it, and that can be done. We can do that remotely, but the earliest it would be able to be done is next week, middle to the end of next week. And then I would suggest that the resolution establishing the permitting process for this year waive the sketch plan requirement, waive the fee, and simply maintain that a permit has to be submitted so that we know who is looking to have outdoor seating. And then also that the requirement in the law that the village be named as additional insured on the general liability insurance of the establishment, that we maintain that, and that we have proof filed in the main office that the village is named as such. And so I'll throw it open to thoughts, questions, comments from the board on this issue.
I do think that we need to support the businesses and give them the easiest path to opening and recouping as much revenue as they can at this point. I think this is one step in cleaning up things that take those small businesses a lot of time to get through. And therefore I support the resolution, the amendment.
I agree
Well,
wholeheartedly. Yeah.
I do as well too. I was a little unclear. The phasing was the idea to introduce the law so we can vote on it next month and then pass the resolutions afterwards.
Right, so the resolution is the draft resolution, 7A6, I think that is. Really, we don't have the authority to do that under the existing local law.
Right.
My recommendation actually, let me pull up my calendar. My recommendation actually, if the board is available, would be to introduce the local law amendment tonight and set a public hearing date on it for sometime either next Thursday is too soon. We can make it 2 Mondays from now. We can make it the 22nd. Get it done this month. Basically, if phase 3 had happened on time, we would have been rushing a little bit, but not as much as we might feel we are now. But then have it done. If that local law, if we're able to adopt it before the end of the month and then immediately after the resolution, then that gives restaurants some time to kind of game plan how they want that to look even before the 4th of July weekend and for the rest of the summer.
I'm free the 22nd. That works for me.
Same.
Me too.
Yeah, I'll just add, I've spoken to a handful of businesses about kind of what we discussed in our last meeting, and there was genuine excitement about all of it. So the community is appreciative.
Good. Then why don't we, before I say that, I better check my calendar again. Then we will consider the draft local law amendment. We'll consider it introduced tonight. And then Tammy, if you would, set the public hearing date for Monday, the 22nd, 7 p.m.
It would be helpful for me if we could do 6. I don't know how other people feel about
6
that.
p.m. 6 p.m. Do I hear 5 p.m.?
Honestly, I'd rather 5. I could do 6. It's kind of smacking dinner time though.
Either dinner
Anyone
time.
else?
bedtime.
Anyone else for
Fine.
anyone else for 5?
Okay.
So we'll do 6 then.
6
Is
is
6 work? Is 6 workable?
I can make it work.
So we'll do 6 p.m. on the 22nd via Zoom, unless, which 2 weeks is an eternity these days. We may, if we're still allowed to do it by Zoom, we'll do it by Zoom, unless the governor changes those protocols on us. Okay.
Real quick, Roden,
Yeah.
the draft of the resolution that's in the Dropbox, just not that it's important right now, but when we get there, there's the second to last further resolved has a bunch of periods in it and maybe isn't the right wording, just as an FYI there.
Yep. No, that is for us to discuss. We can do it now or we can do it on the 22nd. That is the time frame during the day. When do we want to allow service either for food and or alcoholic beverages? I think the original local law or regulations from it had a 10 p.m. cutoff. So just we can be thinking between now and the 22nd. And maybe Keith, if you want to reach out to our Main Street restaurants and establishments and get a sense from them, what kind of time frame would be either useful or acceptable. One of the concerns back in 2015 from residents was, we don't necessarily want whatever one can imagine happening out, midnight kind of time frame. So, we're talking about, that's where we settled on dinner service hours. But if we want to expand that slightly and try it, what time seems fair?
Okay, yeah, happy to do that.
Next item under old business, we have talked at times about a more formalized sidewalk steering committee of some kind. Sensitive to the fact that we don't necessarily want to just keep dreaming up new committees to appoint people to and find busy work for them. But we do have an ongoing group of dedicated volunteers who seem to want to help replace or repair sections of sidewalk a couple hundred feet at a time, and whether it would be worth it for the village to have a group whose purpose is to keep track of where those needs lie. Now I know that we've talked in the past about whether Ben Carver, whether the Street Tree Advisory Committee would be willing to expand their role in this direction. And I know that there's been some reluctance on some of the members to do that. Wondering if that might be something we can revisit. We're not looking for studies and a whole lot of work, but more just a coordinating mechanism of some kind between the village and the volunteers that kind of helps direct their efforts every year.
I'd certainly be happy to ask again. I mean, when I asked the first time, there was not a lot of reluctance in the no's. It was pretty definitive, but I'd be happy to ask again. I mean, at this point, a lot of our really urgent work as a tree committee is complete. So there may be some openness to it now, although to be honest, I doubt it, but I'd be happy to ask again.
Yeah, if you would, and frame it. We're not looking for this group to investigate where the next major grant application is going to be filed. I'm not really thinking about it in those terms. Although if a grant application comes along to file and there's interest from the group to assist with it, that would certainly be great. I'm really looking at it from the perspective of where if we have a community sidewalk build this year to repair or install some sidewalk somewhere, where's it going to be? And in a way, the core volunteer group led by Alan Vogel has almost been their own committee of sorts in the past, identifying areas of need. But the sense is that they have other interests in other projects, and they'd be happy to help with sidewalk, but they're not necessarily going to walk the village and find the next spot that needs it.
Yeah, I'll definitely ask.
Okay. Good. Anything else for old business? How are we on time? Hey, we're ahead of schedule. Item number 8 on the agenda is new business. I added at the beginning of the meeting. We have received a number of requests over the weekend. I think in terms of emails, we're a little over a dozen, between 12 and 15. And I know I received requests via text and messenger as well. To have the village post signs and or fly a flag acknowledging support for Black Lives Matter. I'm bringing it to the board because I think the board was included on all those emails. So bringing it to the board for discussion to make a determination on that. As you all know, I have, how long has it been now? I have for 13 years avoided or sought to avoid or encouraged the village to avoid activist stances, even for subject matter that the members of the board support, and try to maintain the neutrality of the government entity. I'm still generally that's my default position. for government. And if the time has come that the will of the board has shifted to allowing for it, then so be it. And then if that is, this is a part two, if the will of the board has shifted on that issue, then in the Dropbox, item number 8, in a conversation with Nancy Zahler, our town supervisor this morning, she had mentioned that the same conversation had come up several years ago, and that their town board decided to adopt a written policy for how to field requests, and what types of requests they would entertain. I've asked Kimberly Bell at the school whether they have a similar written policy, and she wasn't sure. She was going to look into it. So one possibility, if the board is of a mind to shift off of the stance of neutrality whenever possible from a government perspective, maybe the time has come, maybe the day has come to develop something written. And I know from the town's perspective, they had their attorney draft this because they didn't want to ever be accused somewhere down the road in the future by some other group that maybe they didn't support, being arbitrary and capricious in their decision making, which always gets governments in trouble and gets lawyers paid well. So that's what I wanted to, all of those different pieces and moving parts to throw open to the board for discussion.
You want me to go first?
Whoever wants to wade in first.
Okay, I'm more than willing to do this, I guess, because I've thought about nothing else for a good portion. First, for the members of the public that don't know me, I am actually in an interracial marriage. I have been married for over 40 years. I've been in this area for more than 35 years. And this is all my opinion. It seems like such a simple question, hang the Black Lives Matter flag or not. My dilemma is that I do not want this to be the panacea to all individuals to point and see our community as woke. What a wonderful thing that is, more a marketing ploy than an ethos. One needs to look at the enlightened city down the road in Ithaca to see what is clearly great marketing. Aspirational, yes, but certainly not true in the view of many, evidenced by the lawsuits. Trumansburg is a wonderful place and has many well-intentioned people. The difficulty is in awakening all to self-awareness and taking the effort to reflect and actually see what is happening. Let's be clear, this is work. It is not a slogan. Systemic racism cannot exist without the support of the majority. Having raised children in our school system is a primary example. As a parent, we learned early on raising concerns would not be addressed. It only made it more difficult for our children. Since my children have been grown, I have heard from another parent that her child came home and wanted to know why the teachers picked on my child and targeted him. This was from a 5th or 6th grader at the time. My children were far from perfect, yet they had to toe that line and suffer through it. Does it lead anyone to wonder why it seems they are angry? Would you, if you were the other parent hearing this concern from your child, done anything about it? Contacted the school or the other mother? Let's add that when I shared this with 2 friends later in life, when we were talking about our children saying that they were always on different playing fields, they could not see it and thought I was wrong. That is the blind spot, white privilege, and that is where people need to be seen and heard and not dismissed. This is about having the conversations when they happen and reflecting on whose truth you are listening to. One of the most abhorrent terms I hear and shamefully admit I have said is, quote, those people, unquote. Check yourself. They are you with a different twist, more melanin, more money, more environmental consciousness. Take action. Don't accept it from others. Do not become complacent. call it out, then we can really see that Black Lives Matter works. Before we go, I do want to make the statement that I will never and have never supported defunding the Trumansburg Police Department. I have confidence that they are well managed, effective, and necessary for the safety of our community. In conclusion, my apologies to the people of color in this community for not making enough of a difference to see better results after 40 years.
Thank you, Deb.
Thank you, Deb. Anyone else?
I feel like anything I had to say right now would be fairly redundant. I agree with all of that. The one thing I would add is that I don't think that this is necessarily a step back from our anti-activism stance. I still believe strongly that that is the right thing to do. For instance, the example that I like is the anti-war resolution. I think that puts us square in the face of issues that are outside of our jurisdiction and outside of our purview. If we become bogged down in every national issue that happens and we have to take a stance on every issue, we'll no longer get anything done. That said, I think Black Lives Matter is a very real issue in our community. I think we all have heard stories about Cheeverg as a place where driving while Black is a true crime. I certainly know that my brother and his friends are well aware of that, or at least have historically been. I think we've moved away from that. I think we've taken real and concrete actions that make that less true now than maybe it was, but that doesn't make it untrue, certainly. And I think it's important that we recognize not only the truth of this as a national movement, but as something that we need to face in the village, in a concrete way in the village. As Deb points out, this isn't like an end game, and certainly hanging a flag doesn't help, right? Or it doesn't, I'm sorry, it does help, but it doesn't fix anything in a concrete way. But I think it's an important step to take at any level. Certainly for us, I think it's important to acknowledge our flaws. And this is a step towards, I don't know, hopefully something productive.
I'll jump in and kind of second everything here. I appreciate, Roden, you finding this resolution from the town, because I think it's helpful. I do like the idea of having a consistent rubric by which we kind of think about these things. I'm actually persuaded by Ben's point that this is maybe not quite the same thing anyhow, in that, you know, this is a local issue. This is something that's pertinent directly to us and to our village. But even still, I was kind of reading over the resolution from Ulysses, and I think it not that we would obviously have to take up their resolution word for word, but I think it's well written, and I think it directly points to, you know, supporting this kind of action, even if we were to kind of go that route of opening this door a little wider. So I'm kind of rambling. I mostly because I'm not persuaded by Ben's kind of point that I'm not sure that this really opens that door either. And maybe we can kind of view it in that regard as well. That this is really about supporting our local community, our local Black community members, and pointing out the issues that we have to grapple with locally. And I think it fits well within that rubric that I think we still are trying to uphold.
Keith?
Yeah, for me, you know, the first thing I did when considering this is I reached out to friends in the Black community. I sent an email to some, you know, the director of the Southside Community Center, who I've met a couple times, been through some programming there, and just wanted to ensure that this was a gesture that would be seen as genuine. You know, I'm kind of what Deb said. I'm sensitive to that. I want to make sure that it's not what the white community of Trumansburg thinks needs to be done, but that it's, you know, that's part of it. But I want to make sure that it's something that's seen as a genuine sign of support. And, you know, I feel in those conversations that I feel confident that it is in this moment. You I also asked, what can a municipality do legislatively to help reinforce some of this? And so I think that's a longer discussion that I didn't have a chance to get into real deeply with folks. But so I would, as we think about this and, supporting everything we can do to be anti-racist, to support all sorts of, civil rights issues, what's, I'd like to always consider an action plan after the symbolic gesture. And, there's certainly limitations as a municipality, but, I think it's a worthy discussion, after we hang a banner, after we put up a sign, what then, what do we do? What can we help facilitate if there's nothing we can actually do legislatively? So I just, again, always just want to be conscious of what is is there any additional action? There's going to be lots of yard signs around town. So and like the resolution from Ulysses, I think that's very helpful, kind of sets a bit of a precedent. I would say, I think this is a unique moment in history. And, it's certainly come too late, but it's here. And I know there's you look around the country, you see a lot of businesses, nonprofits, etc., that would typically be anti-political, wouldn't weigh in on this, and they're weighing in on this. And so I think it's important that as a municipality, we do what we can to show that support. And if we want to talk long-term about policies, I think we should do that too. But I would not want to sit this out on behalf of reviewing a policy. I also went onto the Library of Congress website and saw there's about 9 different national observances. And I think we should take a look at some of those. If we're talking about equality, there's a lot of recognitions, a lot of individuals in our community who are deserving of recognition. And so I think that's another topic. I'd be interested in a discussion about, do we want to be proactive versus reactive in some situations? How proactive do we want to be in recognizing different groups in our community? And Roaring, it sounds like historically that's not been something the board has done, but we're in a unique time right now, and I think a lot of things are on the table, and we don't, there's a lot of conversations we need to have, a lot of listening we need to do, and so I think just I'm in support of this, but I also want to make sure we keep the conversation going and maybe broaden the scope as needed.
Yeah, historically, the approach of the board has been, rather than risk leaving anyone out, in a proactive approach that misses someone, that the stance of the board would be to not take any advocacy type positions across the board. But as I said in my opening comment, if the time has come, if that sentiment has changed, then the board just needs to kind of think through, how do we long term, and I think it is always a long term question in my mind for anything, is long term, how do we manage? Because this is, you're right, Keith, this is an important moment in history, but it won't be the last one. And there will be requests made of us from any of a number of other sides that you could have possibly imagine. And I would just as soon, to to the point of the Ulysses resolution, when I was thinking through it over the weekend, I would just as soon, as you all know, my MO is basically what is in the best interest of the village of Trumansburg and how can we equip future village boards on which some of us may not sit to be able to make good decisions. Well, we can't handcuff them. We can at least try to give them something to work with, because Lord knows when we stumble across something that some previous board didn't leave us well equipped to handle, we wish they had. So I'd like to have this board begin to think about how do we navigate and prepare to handle the next very important issue, because Lord knows America's got a lot of them. So this is not something we would need a resolution for. I just wanted to make sure the board adequately discussed it and kind of get the sentiment of everyone as to how to proceed to the requests we got over the weekend, number one, and number two, whether to take the time to draft up something more formal for future decision making.
I'll say I'm in favor of both. I think it'd be interesting to at least walk down that path and look at what a resolution to help guide ourselves and future boards would look like. And I think we can have that in parallel with the idea of going forward with the ask that's been made of us to fly a flag.
I think you just volunteered to tackle drafting that resolution, Ben.
Fair enough.
So I'll say I agree with that. I think both is a good idea. I do think that I remember Ulysses passing this resolution, and obviously I think most of everyone present was here at the Democratic Caucus when Michael Boggs talked about his stance on the pride flag, which is what brought all of this up. And I think that the primary fear is the slippery slope argument, that once we've done one, we'll do them all. And from my perspective, that is our job. That is the fundamental basis of our job, is to walk that slippery slope and make clear-eyed decisions throughout. I don't really think we need a resolution. I think we can make those decisions. To me, there was no doubt when we voted to hang the pride flag, and there's no doubt now. But I'm certainly not against it. I think it's probably proactive. And as you point out, maybe there's legal issues attached to this that I haven't even considered. So that sounds wise.
We resolve to use our best judgment. We can just leave it at that.
Some lawyer somewhere is chomping at the bit if we pass a resolution that says that.
Probably all of them.
Yeah. Deb, Keith, anything else to add before we move on?
I do believe that of all of us, I am probably the most cynical. And I do believe that.
Do I get to be a close second?
Probably. I want to stress, I guess what I agree in principle that Black Lives Matter is important, and it is the time and history is being made. I don't want to lose the fact that that slogan is not a municipality's decision, and it's not all about policing. That's it. There's so much individual responsibility in living this. I, again, don't want people walking away with a comfort level thinking that I have supported this and not recognize anything in their own behaviors that contribute to the larger picture. That being said, I will go forward supporting the flag and the process that you've defined to do a overall statement, like Ulysses.
Okay, good. Keith, any any last words?
No, not really. I'm just wondering, and maybe this was said and I missed it. To Debbie's point, I wonder, do we write anything to accompany this, to maybe say some of the things she just said? Is that important to us, that we don't just hang a flag, but we sometimes with flags or banners come proclamations of some sort, and maybe that's important that we say that there's more to this than just this gesture that needs to go with it.
It's not a bad idea.
I
I
like
think
that.
I think from where I sit, a danger that I see across the political spectrum and across all spectrums, really, when it comes to ideas, and the discussion of topics in the discussion of ideas. There's always the danger of what I've heard referred to as symbolism over substance. We don't want to slip into any kind of a trap where, to Deb's point, that yeah, there's always a lot of layers to important issues, and I don't necessarily want to. It's certainly always easier, I guess this is speaking to previous boards, it's always easier to not have to flesh through all these different layers. But if we were going to do that, then yeah, I think it may be worth something. I don't know if it's just a statement, if someone wants to draft something for the rest of us to look at that we can post. You just post Deb's statement. That was pretty good. Whatever the board feels is appropriate. I mean, specifically, we're responding to requests from members of the public, some of whom were village residents. Actually, most of whom were not, as far as I could tell. But it was a request made, and without a formal policy for how to handle it, here we are handling it. To Ben Carver's point. So, but does it? Yeah, I think if the board thinks it would be helpful to craft something, then I'd like to see that.
Can I nominate Keith to draft something?
I would defer to Deputy Mayor Watkins. If she does not want to take it on, I'm happy to compose something and share it with the group. But she wrote some great words earlier, so I don't want to ignore that.
She didn't realize there's a reason that election got postponed.
Yeah. Yeah, that would have. That is one of those things, isn't it? I thought I was done. It's like, I will actually take it on. And of course, with everybody's help.
Great.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay. Excellent. Unless there's any, are there any other items of new business? So I figure out which preposition to use. Then moving on to item number 9 on the agenda, which is approval of abstracts. Which is down here somewhere. We have general fund abstract totaling $134,755.90.
I'll move that we pay that abstract.
There you go.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
So I was actually looking through this, the gas charges. I can't remember seeing those. Is that how it usually goes? Do they just wait and then?
Yes, so the school sends us a bill supposed to be semi-annually. The last couple of years, I think it's been annually.
Okay. I'm just not
it's-
remembering the last one.
Once upon a time, actually, I think it was quarterly. So we'll see if we can move up to biannually next. I don't know. I have said something to Kimberly about it. But
Yeah.
we use the gas, so I suppose we should pay for it.
Yeah.
Any other questions on this abstract? Hearing none, then all in favor of paying the general fund abstract, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? We have an EMS billing revenue abstract, $16,408.95.
Move that we approve the EMS billing abstract.
Second.
Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? We have a water fund abstract, $53,208.66.
I move that we pay the water abstract of $53,208.66.
Second.
Any discussion, questions, comments? Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? We have a sewer fund abstract, $24,616.23.
I move that we pay the sewer abstract for $24,616.23.
Second.
Any discussion?
What did we use Guy for on the I&I?
He did look at something. He looked at the MRB contract, I think. I honestly don't remember.
A long time, it looks like.
Why am I not seeing that?
It's the first, the first page, maybe midway.
1519 is the number.
Yeah,
Oh, there he is.
$200. So like, what's that? Half an hour?
There was a conference call. No, yes, there was a conference call with MRB and the DEC, I believe, regarding a wasn't a nasty grant, but it was a letter from the DEC about our I&I issues.
Right.
But yeah, ongoing. Any other questions or comments? If not, then all in favor of paying the sewer fund abstract, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Capital project Safe Routes to School. So this is a refunding of our borrowed money for the South Street Sidewalk project. Municipal Solutions bill for $3,614.50.
I move that we pay $3,614.50 from the capital project for Safe Routes to School.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, then all in favor, please say aye.
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 Trust and agency abstracts in the amount of $2,049.27.
I move that we pay this abstract.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, then all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? And then that closes out the 2019, 2020 bills. We now have some vouchers and some audited vouchers for the various funds for the first part of the 2021 fiscal year. So basically first week and a half of June, we've had some bills come in. The first one being in the general fund abstract to the tune of a total of $12,325.85.
These all look to be like our annual payments to everybody.
Yeah.
I don't know that they came in as bills. They're just it's time to pay all the annuals. Well,
Right. Yeah. Historical Society, Library, Chamber, and so on.
right. So I move that
Let's-
we pay $12,325.85 from the general fund.
We
Second.
have a motion. There's a second. Any discussion?
Cleaning is
Hearing
spelled
none.
wrong.
Cleaning.
Yeah.
Second to last.
Clenang.
Yeah.
Not sure it matters.
Okay. Any other comments, questions, or notes? If not, then all in favor of paying this general fund abstract, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Your water fund abstract in the amount of the smallest water fund abstract we've ever seen, $942.63.
Move we approve that water fund abstract.
What is this?
It's the water tower, Sprint and the water tower. Why would we be paying them? They pay us, don't they? I'm quite confused about this one.
So what happens is we pay the tax bill and then the tax bill goes to them for reimbursement. It's for the whip antennas on top of our water tower.
Because they're not municipal, so they're not
So we
tax
actually get
exempt.
taxed, right?
Oh,
And then we send the cost on to Sprint and the rest of them.
okay. Thank you, Tammy. I remember that. I just couldn't put it
But
together.
that was the same thing I questioned. So glad you asked.
No worries.
Where are we?
Okay.
Did we get a
So
second?
Did we get a
Opposed,
second, Tammy, did we get a second on that?
No.
Waiting
I'll
on a
second.
second then. All
I'll
right, there it
second.
is.
Oh, okay. He got it.
Sorry, Keith.
It's all right.
You can
All
get the
right,
next
then
one.
if there's no additional questions on the water fund abstract, first one of the fiscal year, all in favor of paying it, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Last but not least, sewer fund, $680.25.
I move we approve the sewer fund abstract.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, let's see. Item number 10 on the agenda is our second public comment period, second privilege of the floor. I do see one member of the public who, yes, I see a hand
Raise your
raised.
hand.
See if I can make this happen for you, Rachel. Where did she go? Rachel, go right ahead.
For myself.
Yes, Rachel, you're on.
Okay, cool. Thank you guys. I was psyched to hear all the bill paying. That was great.
You missed it. You missed it, didn't you?
I appreciate your discussion on the signs, and I definitely hear the concern about the performative, possibly empty symbolic aspect of the sign. And my current strategy with my sign, which I just got, was to it's facing the house. So for what it's worth, that's just my kind of way of dealing with that issue. It's facing the house so I can see it when I leave the house every morning and think about what it is meaning in my life rather than just performing it for the outside world. And I appreciate what you all said about the weekend demonstration. And I'm also just learning about protest. And I'm actually reading at the moment because, as you know, I'm not all that great at speaking on the fly. But what I'd like to say is that our police department handled the road closure gracefully, I thought. And I wanted to highlight for anyone in this meeting or listening to the recording that wasn't at the demonstration that I can imagine that someone caught unaware or trying to leave the area in a vehicle might have been in an inconvenient position. And inconvenience is one thing, but the driver of that vehicle, whether he was performing a stunt to share on social media or found himself in the right place at the right time to make a point, or intended to intimidate or harm, or all of the above, the speed at which he entered Main Street was dangerous and violent. And he did slow down, luckily. But a good number of folks in the community are really glad to hear that the incident is being followed up on. And indeed, there is a lot of interest in the community for some acknowledgement of the incident, whatever that looks like, whether it's, indeed, it sounds like probably after the investigation is done. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Let's see, Mark, I guess, if you have anything to add, or Matt, either one of you.
I'm all set, Roden. Thank you.
I don't have anything, but I enjoyed the discussion, especially the bill paying.
Well, thank you for being here this evening and sitting through all of it, including the bill paying. Item number 11 is an executive session, which we do have a couple of executive session items regarding both police personnel as well as fire inspector. And is there anything else executive session wise? Then I would entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss police and front office personnel.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. And I will bid good night to everyone who's not on the board, and Tammy and Morgan can stick around.
Thanks,
while
everyone.
See you, Matt.
Yeah.
See, Matt.
While I pause the recording.